Morning, everyone. Joshua Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. I am a meteorologist in the Raleigh area with 20 years plus experience. I've been on YouTube since the end of last year upon the encouragement of a few friends who know me and know what I like to do. But I will say things are very quickly ramping up in the tropics, and there's some great concern now that Idalia is going to continue to strengthen into a major hurricane and take aim here at the central Gulf Coast of Florida near the Big Bend or perhaps the Nature Coast here by Wednesday morning. So I am going to do things a little bit differently than the National Hurricane Center. I'm doing my own forecasting, and as a result, you'll see that my forecasts are going to be a little bit stronger on intensity here, although I think the National Hurricane Center is doing a good job of catching us up here. I still don't think they're quite strong enough, and I'm going to go over the reasons why. So let me share my screen with you all here and show you what we're going to be taking a look at here. And unfortunately, the non-technical term here is that we're going to have yet another storm that strengthens very quickly over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. This seems to be kind of a regular occurrence between Ian last year, Michael, Ida, and many of the other storms that have gone over very warm waters. Conditions are pretty close to ideal for rapid intensification once this storm moves into the Gulf of Mexico overnight tonight, and especially during the day Tuesday. In that 24-hour period from about midnight on Tuesday to midnight on Wednesday, I do think we are going to see a very quickly strengthening hurricane. And there's going to be some differences on how that happens in the forecast. So I'm going to kind of take the middle road on the approach here. We've got wind shear, which is impacting the storm a little bit here and keeping the core from really getting going, but it is still strengthening regardless of that. So Idalia is doing a great job of fending off the wind shear and holding her own ground here. She's standing her own ground, but that wind shear is expected to lessen for about 24 hours and waters are going to be warmer. So conditions should be very ideal for a storm like this to strengthen very quickly. And then as the storm comes into the Gulf Coast here of Florida early on Wednesday, I think that intensification stops and we see a little bit more wind shear and dry air at that point, but the damage will have been done. The storm is expected to grow. I do think the pressure is going to drop more quickly than how the winds respond to it, but as the storm grows in size, that is going to mean a larger area of population that will be impacted by hurricane conditions. This red area here is the cone of uncertainty. I know a lot of you in the Gulf Coast are familiar with that term. It means that the storm center itself could end up as far west here as, say, just east of Apalachicola upon landfall to as far down the coast as Bradenton, Florida. So there's still a chance this storm could go on the eastern side of this envelope, which would mean very bad conditions for Southwest Florida. And I know you all don't want to hear that after Ian last year, but there's also equally a chance that the storm center comes in here to Wakulla County, and we see the strongest winds coming right up the Big Bend, which would be catastrophic for places like Tallahassee and especially the coastal zones off to the south and east of you. My official forecast has really not changed much, even though the models are going to kind of do a bit of a dance left and right. I still have the storm making landfall here in Levy and Franklin counties as a Category 4 hurricane. And then after landfall, we are going to see a bend to the right and some acceleration of the storm, weakening to a Category 1 hurricane, bringing potentially some hurricane conditions into northeast Florida and southeast Georgia, including the Jacksonville area, including Brunswick Island. And then beyond that, I think it's a tropical storm moving near the low country of South Carolina and then out to sea away from the Carolinas by Friday morning. After that, we're going to have to keep an eye on things in Bermuda, but I don't think this system is going to try to regenerate into a hurricane after it moves off the coast. Waters are warm here, but wind shear is picking up, and I think that does counterbalance it. So really, our key time frame to watch here is going to be midnight tomorrow to midnight on Wednesday, and that's when the storm is going to, in my opinion, go bonkers. Now, the Hurricane Center has intensified the storm now to a major hurricane. This should not be a surprise to anybody who's been watching my videos over the last few days. They've seen this real threat. I see this real threat. I think that this still has a higher ceiling and it could go stronger. At this point, I don't think Category 5 hurricane, but certainly Category 4 is a possibility. The difference between a high 3 and a low 4 is not very big, same as the difference between a high 4 and a low 5, as we learned in Southwest Florida last year with Ian. But currently, we do have a tropical storm warning for northeastern Yucatan. We have a hurricane warning now for the western tip of Cuba, as we are expecting this storm to approach hurricane strength here this afternoon as it moves near the western tip of Cuba. We now have hurricane watches in effect from basically Apalachicola right on through the Big Bend, down through Nature Coast, including the Tampa Bay area, and all the way down to about just north of Cape Coral, so about Northport, Florida, and then a tropical storm watch for southwestern Florida until you get down to about the Everglades, tropical storm watch for the middle and lower Keys, and a tropical storm warning for the dry Tortugas here. So this is the National Hurricane Center track. I am just a tiny bit west, and I'm about 20 miles per hour stronger upon landfall. So I'm really not that much different than them, but obviously I am different. And I'm going to go over those differences. In addition to that, we do have Hurricane Franklin, which is our first major hurricane of the season. I think Idalia will be our second. So we went from 0 to 2 here in about 2 days. We also have an area to watch coming off of the Atlantic, which, let me refresh this here, has about a 40% chance of becoming our next tropical storm, Jose, but not a threat to land at that point. Here's a look at the wide view. I'm going to show you the players on the field here first, and then we're going to go into some more specifics. And you can see very clearly we've got Tropical Storm Idalia here in the Northwest Caribbean. We've got Hurricane Franklin here, which is in the Southwest Atlantic, halfway between the Bahamas and Bermuda. And we've got a trough of low pressure here moving through and splitting over the southeastern United States and bringing some storms to Louisiana, where it was about 110 degrees in Lafayette yesterday, which is an all-time record high. So extreme heat over this part of the country, but we do have a weakness that is coming through underneath. And what that weakness is going to do is it's going to come down a little bit further here into the southeastern Gulf, and it is going to give Idalia a bit of a kick northward here as we get later into today, and should turn that storm more towards the Big Bend here. Now, a lot of you in Southwest Florida are probably thinking, well, we saw this with Ian last year where we were expecting a landfall up in here, and instead it ended up farther down the coast. In fact, Tampa Bay was the landfall point up until about 12 hours before the storm. Then we saw a turn this way. Where I don't think that's going to be the case again is the fact that this year we've got Hurricane Franklin over here, major hurricane, and that is reshaping the size of our ridge of high pressure. So we actually do have a bit of a ridge of high pressure right in here. And because we've got that ridge here, I don't think that Idalia is going to cut into the ridge into Southwest Florida. Is there a chance this ridge gets pushed a little bit farther east and opens up that avenue? Certainly, but I just don't see it happening this year. Last year with Ian, we did not have a ridge in this area. In fact, we had it out in here, and that's the reason the storm came up in this direction. But this year, that ridge is over here, and that is a subtle but an important difference in the longer term forecast here. We do have a trough over the eastern United States. That's why the weather has been really nice and cool here in New England. We've had some cool mornings here, a taste of a little bit of fall. That is going to pick up Franklin and turn it to the right here, and it's also eventually going to pick up Idalia and turn it to the right. So this trough is kind of our biggest player on the field, but we have a smaller player in the way here. This is like the secondary blitz getting through the defensive line. If you're a football fan, you might know what I'm talking about. If you're not, that's okay. We also have a weakness over here, an upper level low, which unfortunately is not bringing enough moisture up into this ridge to cool us off in Texas really any. And then we've got Tropical Storm Irwin here in the Pacific, which is not a threat to land. It's going to head out harmlessly to sea here. So really the two big players on the map are Idalia and Franklin. The other players that maybe they're not going to get you any fantasy points, but they're there, are this trough over here, this high pressure ridge right here, and this piece of energy right here that's diving down into the central Gulf of Mexico. All right, so that's my football analogy. I'm ready for football. Here's a closer look, and you guys can see here that Idalia has grown in size. We don't quite have a central core at this point, but we do have a growing system. And this has the look of a storm that has the look, if you guys know what I'm talking about, the look of something that's going to grow here. And it's very rare to see these kind of storms so close to each other strengthening, but that is what we're dealing with here, despite the El Nino in 2023. Very warm temperatures in the ocean here. Looking farther to the north, I will show you all here this because it is important. And I'm trying to find my pen to show you guys. Here we go. So you can see there is this ridge of high pressure right in here to the north of Franklin. Big high centered off the southeast coast. That's why it's so hot in this area here. And that is going to kind of block Franklin from coming any closer to the East Coast. Not an East Coast problem, although we are going to have the swells from Franklin impacting the beaches here. So rough surf expected over the mid-Atlantic coast. This is Bermuda right here. Now you see this trough in here? That is going to turn Franklin eventually more towards Bermuda. Now, The overall guidance takes the system well to the north of Bermuda, but close enough to cause hurricane force winds just north of the island and tropical storm force winds on the island. The European model has continued to show the closest approach of all the models. Other models show it kind of coming a couple hundred miles to the north of Bermuda, but either way, it puts Bermuda on the right side where the strongest winds are going to be. Beyond that, this trough looks like it's going to protect Atlantic Canada from any kind of direct impacts. However, Franklin may try to get forced more to at least the outside waters here of Newfoundland. So we're going to be watching that here at the end of this week. But you can see over here, we've got our upper level low as well. And that is going to draw Idalia up into the Eastern Gulf here, somewhere in this zone, maybe as far east as here, but I'm thinking in this area is where we're going to see the likely strongest winds and surf from Idalia. So I'm going to break all that down for you guys here, but I thought it was important to at least kind of show you the water vapor so you can see all the features on the map. And then we're going to keep an eye on the Eastern Atlantic here in a few days as this wave comes across. Right now, it doesn't look like an immediate threat. Water temperatures are running very hot. We've talked about this all season long. This was one of our key indicators that this was going to be an active season. Despite an El Nino, which usually causes a little bit more wind shear, we do see some relaxed wind shear and an opening here for a storm to come into the warmest waters here in the Atlantic Ocean, and that is over the Eastern Gulf, where temperatures are running 31 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Celsius. It's close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see waters are above average. This is typically the warmest time of the year, and we see above average waters over the Eastern Gulf of Mexico. So you take what's already a very warm body of water and we make it warmer than average. And that, of course, provides a little bit more fuel for this storm to strengthen than what you would typically see. From the University of Miami, this is the oceanic heat content. This measures how deep that warm water gets into the ocean. The strongest heat content is actually just south here of Idalia, but I think this is contributing to Idalia strengthening here. The fact that we've got a lot of warm water to tap into, and as the storm moves up here over the warm loop current here of the southeastern Gulf, it is going to get a nice kick here in the butt and will strengthen over the southeast Gulf. As it comes up closer to Florida, momentum will allow it to continue to strengthen, but it will probably hit a certain point where it can't strengthen anymore. But nonetheless, at that point, the storm will have grown into a very big system. So right now, Tropical Storm Idalia has minimum central pressure of 988 millibars, which is equivalent to a strong tropical storm. That is being measured by satellite in estimates as well as planes that are flying into and out of the storm. And that honestly is lower than what all the global models have been predicting. So Idalia is already above what the launch point was here for this storm. You will see on the satellite, it is also allowing thunderstorms, which have not really happened on the north side of the core here, to now finally develop here, which is not uncommon for the middle of the night to see these kind of colder cloud tops. But the center is actually kind of down in here, but we are now seeing more storm development on the northern side of the system. Where we're lacking it right now is kind of on the western side right here. We've got some dry air in place. However, if these cold cloud tops overtake this dry air and this is allowed to grow on the western side, then I do believe it's going to be all systems go. And that is probably going to happen once the storm just gets to the very western tip of Cuba and then moves into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. Very good agreement on our storm track. Overall, most of the models bring it into the Nature Coast and Eastern Big Bend. We do have one outlier that takes it up in this direction. I don't think that's going to happen. It's got it already moving northeast. We're not seeing that motion right now. So overall, I think we are seeing very good agreement. Could this still shift west or east? Absolutely. We could see more data from more aircraft that go into the storm that say, hey, you're all wrong, and you end up over here, or you end up down in here. But right now, pretty good confidence that our track takes this storm system in about 48 to 60 hours from this model run. That's 2 a.m. So 48 hours from 2 a.m. is 2 a.m. Wednesday. It's going to be here. And then around 10 a.m. Wednesday, it's going to be making landfall. Sometime late in the morning to around lunchtime on Wednesday. That landfall point, if it's down here, would be sooner. If it's up in here, would be a little bit later due to the shape of the Florida coast. But we're looking at anywhere from Wednesday morning in Citrus County, perhaps, or across the southern Nature Coast, to maybe lunchtime here over the eastern Big Bend, over places like Cedar Key, to, if this shifts west, perhaps early afternoon over the Appalachee Bay. So that's what we're looking at as far as landfall. Intensification is likely, and all of our models turn this into a hurricane. We already kind of knew that was going to happen. We do have some rapid intensification models. I know it's really hard to see them, so I'm going to circle them for you. But these two yellow lines right here, these are the rapid intensification models, all allow this to rapidly intensify in this area here. And this model only goes 24 hours. But if you take this slope here and continue it, then we likely have a category, high-end category 3, maybe low-end category 4 here in about 48 to 60 hours. So we are looking at the peak of the storm system here early in the day on Wednesday as potentially a category 3. And in my opinion, I don't know if the models are even quite strong enough, perhaps even low-end category 4 at this point. So not a huge difference between this and this, but obviously category 3 is going to be a destructive storm. Category 4 would be catastrophic. I don't think this gets to category 5. You know, it's just so rare to see that. I know we saw it briefly with Ian last year. We saw it with Michael, but you know, anything is possible here when you deal with warm waters. And if the models are a little bit overdone on the wind shear, or if there's just a little bit more growth on the western side, I would never rule out that possibility here. I hate to even speak like that because I know that's a scary thought, but I've seen so much happen here where every time we looked at a model 2 days before landfall, we saw a category 2 or 3 and end up being a 4 or 5. So there's still a chance for the ceiling to continue to climb on this system, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but you know, that's the world we live in here. So here's the radar. This is from Brian McNulty, and you can see this is the Cozumel radar. And over the last few frames, you can see more of a core forming here, more thunderstorm activity kind of on the northern part of this. Let's look at the Cuba radar because I think that's going to give us kind of a better view of what's going on here. And as we zoom in, we can see the center is right underneath this area of thunderstorms. And what we can also see is this band here starting to get that comma shape here, where we're starting to see that banding and we're seeing more of a central core forming here, as you would expect, because wind shear is starting to lessen a little bit and the waters remain very warm. We're right over some very warm water right in here. So the core of the storm is beginning to take shape, and that's usually the first signal in what could be a rapid intensification phase. If this fills in, which I expect that it will, by the time it gets into here, we will likely have a category 1 hurricane, even though the western side of the storm is not going to be as healthy as the eastern side. What we really need to watch is once it comes up into here, if that core fills in on the western side, which some models show happening, then we very well could have a category 2 or even a category 3 by the time we get up to 24, 25 north. So we're going to be watching this radar like a hawk. We're going to be watching satellite images. We'll be watching aircraft reports. And the storm has already overachieved here. I didn't think it was going to get this strong so soon. So obviously that is of concern. Here's a look at the overall upper level pattern here. This is the European. I know this is very technical, but I'm going to break it down for you guys here. This is showing wind shear from 200 to 850 millibars. So the difference in wind direction and speed from about 5 to 10,000 feet up to about 50,000 feet. And the greater that difference, the stronger the wind shear, the less likely we get thunderstorms to stay central to our storm core. So the lower the wind shear, the less winds blowing off those thunderstorms from the top of the storm, the more strengthening we get. As the storm moves up into the southeastern Gulf, there is some wind shear here, about 30 knots or so. But as you see it moving farther north here tomorrow morning, look, the wind shear just to the north of the system here is no longer strong and out of the north. We actually have some southwesterly wind shear with our approaching trough. So we've got low wind shear here for about 12 to 24 hours tomorrow. And then we don't really get hit by this stronger wind shear from this trough until we get into Wednesday. So we've got a period here where there's low wind shear, very warm waters, and the European's going to be way underdone on this pressure and on the strength of this storm. The tropical models I'm going to show you here are going to be much stronger, and I think those are the ones we have to focus on. But the other thing I want to point out to you with the jet stream digging down here is we could actually see intensification due to some jet stream dynamics. So you can see here's our high pressure area here. We've got a good envelope here of low wind shear in the eastern Gulf. Franklin, on the other hand, is going to start feeling that wind shear first. And then finally, Idalia will feel the wind shear by the time it moves up. By the way, when you see this kind of wind flow from the southwest aloft, even though our storm is heading out to sea, this is bringing a lot of rising motion into the Western Carolinas, and we could see a dumping of rain in here in the mountains. So that's what I'm going to be watching for you guys. Looking at the relative humidity here, you can see there is dry air to the west of our circulation. There's dry air here west of Franklin in between the two storms, but we do have quite a bit of moisture coming up out of the deep tropics, and we do have enough moisture here with Franklin for both of these storms to strengthen quickly. And we are going to see probably two major hurricanes this close to each other, which is so rare. We see that in the Western Pacific, but in this part of the world, that's just very rare. But you can see here, there is still quite a bit of moisture on the northern side of our storm, indicating that this will be a healthy and growing storm. Now, it's going to be fighting wind shear, but if this ends up being a little bit lower, then the storm is going to be bigger and stronger. As it moves away, you can see now our trough finally kicks the system away and brings in that dry air wrapped in, but we see most of the moisture north of the center of the storm and a lot of rain potentially here for the eastern and central Carolinas Wednesday night into Thursday. Then it's moving out quickly, and you can see it's actually potentially getting close to Bermuda. So Bermuda may get brushed to the north and then get brushed to the south by 2 straight storms this week, which is a pretty rare feat, to be honest with you guys, for such a small island. The GFS, on the other hand, unlike the European, says this is going to be a bigger storm. It's going to have a bigger footprint, and it's going to be stronger. And you can see the 959 millibar forecast. That's a Category 3 hurricane. When I show you the tropical models, you'll see that this is still potentially not deep enough. But the other thing I want to bring up to your attention is that you see this huge feed of moisture coming from Central America, well past the fact that we've got Idalia moving away and weakening here over the coastal Carolinas. We've got a tongue of moisture that's going to continue to feed into Central and South Florida. So we're going to have a couple more days of heavy rain well past the fact that Idalia is moving away. We could have heavy rain right up into the first part of the Labor Day weekend here across Florida. And oh, by the way, we're going to have to keep an eye here on potentially the next piece of this gyre in the Western Gulf here after Labor Day. So a little too soon to talk about that, but something we'll be watching here. Here's HAFS tropical model. This shows continued strengthening and potentially a 954 millibar high-end Category 3 hurricane Wednesday morning. And it's possible that this could still be a little bit too weak. And I think that's certainly a possibility, as we may end up seeing a storm in the 940s. If you remember Hurricane Ian, it was in the low 940s. I don't think this system's going to be quite that strong, but certainly low 950s or high 940s. And obviously, the lower that pressure drops, the stronger the storm is going to be. But what you will see on here is that this is a tropics-specific model, and you can see this has a healthy core. It is not getting the dry air into its center until after landfall, and it's got a chance to grow a lot faster than what maybe the models are projecting from the European and the Canadian, the GFS model. Those models do a good job in showing where a storm may form, but they can do a very pitiful job on showing how strong a storm like this could end up being. So just a point I wanted to make for you guys. You can see that the tropical model here, HAFS, takes the storm right along the coast here, Myrtle Beach, Emerald Isle, and obviously it's a lot weaker at this point because you have a trough interaction. You've got dry air coming in, but you still have a formidable storm here in northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, heavy amounts of rain, and you do have some significant wind moving through the Outer Banks on Thursday morning. Then our storm system heads away, and this model takes it well north and west of Cuba, while the European takes it south and west. It's going to be somewhere, or sorry, not Cuba, Bermuda. Been a long week here. But anyway, here's a look at our storm surge forecast. And this is what I'm most concerned with. The Tampa Bay area has a 4 to 7 foot storm surge potential. If you're in places like Clearwater and St. Pete, and you've got an 8-foot ceiling in your front floor, the water may get all the way up to almost the top of that. Obviously, north of Chassahowitzka, all the way to the Asilla River, 7 to 11 feet. And that includes probably Cedar Key on east that has that risk of up to 11 feet. If the storm gets stronger than Category 3, this number continues to climb maybe up to 15 feet. That would not only overtake your first floor of your home, but your second floor of your home. So if you're in Cedar Key, I think you have to think about evacuating, and you need to do it right now. Farther west, if this storm comes farther west, we see the surge number coming up. Right now, that's not the projection. And then we will see dangerous surge into areas that are still cleaning up from Ian, unfortunately. 2 to 4 feet of storm surge here coming through Charlotte Harbor, 3 to 5 feet from Englewood up to the middle of Longboat Key. And it's likely we see storm surge getting into areas close to the bay here, including Oldsmar and Tampa proper. So if this storm comes any farther east, we see the reds coming down. This would be a lot worse for Tampa Bay. So if you are in the low-lying areas around Tampa Bay, I think you need to consider evacuating today and not waiting until tomorrow when this storm is stronger. Heavy rainfall, moderate threat for flooding here near the storm track, and then continuing up to Wilmington, Charleston, Florence, and maybe all the way up to Camp Lejeune. We are looking here at the tropical model, and we can see strengthening here into a hurricane later this morning or this afternoon. And then all systems go here tomorrow over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Very warm waters. You will see the storm is going to grow eastward, so a lot of the stronger winds will be east of the center. And this particular model is a little bit farther west and keeps the strongest wind away from Tampa Bay, but it does bring the storm surge in from the south right on up into the bay. If this is 100 miles to the east, then we see hurricane force conditions hitting Pinellas County. If it's farther west, then obviously better news for Tampa Bay, but certainly still a lot of storm surge to deal with. And of course, worse news for the Big Bend. So this model I kind of agree with, has that landfall here around Taylor, Franklin, Levy counties, somewhere here on the eastern Big Bend. This is Cedar Key. I could see the storm being a little farther east, but we'll have to wait and see. And then as the storm moves inland, it is weakening quickly, but there could still be a corridor of some strong winds, perhaps over 50 miles per hour in southeast Georgia. And if there's a tornado or two, that wind certainly could come up even more. But we will see a quickly weakening storm and then some strong wind coming in, feeding into the Outer Banks here where we're going to have coastal flooding, feeding into the lower Chesapeake Bay as well on Thursday morning. You can see on the backside of the storm, winds are actually going to crank up further, and the Outer Banks could see damaging winds over 50 miles per hour as the storm is pulling away from the coastline here on Thursday afternoon and evening. It still will be somewhat tropical here, and we have to keep an eye on things in Bermuda after that. I need to move along, but the HAFS-B shows a lot of what the A was showing. It's a little farther east. I'm sorry, a little farther west. You can see it's got landfall right here in the most vulnerable part of Florida here into the Appalachee Bay. And that landfall is going to be somewhere around 10 in the morning on Wednesday, Eastern, 9 Central. You could see very strong wind even into southern Georgia, and then weakening wind as it moves through the Carolinas. And this does not have the strong winds on the backside like the HAFS-A did over the Outer Banks. The European model shows our strongest winds are going to be just off the coast here of the Carolinas. It also shows the strongest winds are going to hit areas on the right front quadrant here, 60 to perhaps 100 mile per hour winds just off the coast here. And then those strong winds are going to very quickly move through Jacksonville with wind gusts perhaps up to 60 miles per hour. And then moving offshore after that, 40 to 50 miles per hour here around St. Simon's Island up to Charleston, Data Island, Hilton Head Island could see 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts on Wednesday night and early on Thursday. Rainfall totals are going to be very high here. We're looking at amounts generally 2 to 4 inches, locally as much as 6 to 8. And even more significant here over the Carolinas. The GFS is farther west and brings the heavy rain back into the mountains. I will show that to you here. In fact, it's got amounts as high as 8 inches around Fort Liberty and Fayetteville, as much as 5 inches here around Nashville and Rocky Mount, 7 to 8 inches over the Outer Banks. So the European is about 200 miles east of where the GFS is with our heavy setup for rain. Either way, it's going to be nasty for somebody, and this could still change. Real quick, Major Hurricane Franklin is growing its eye. That eye is certainly warming, and we have a Category 3 storm on its way to becoming a Category 4 here. It will weaken, though, by the time it gets north of Bermuda back to Category 2, and it's likely going to stay well east of Newfoundland, but bring some rough surf into this area. Winds are now 115 miles per hour, predicted to get as high as 135 to 140. Tropical storm force winds are likely just west of Bermuda. Hurricane force winds, though, are not as likely in Bermuda. So I think we'll likely see a tropical storm warning, maybe a hurricane watch for Bermuda, but probably not a hurricane warning at this point. And you will see on Franklin here, we're going to see a little bit more strengthening here in the next 24 hours. Looks like a concentric eye wall, so that will probably lead to an eye wall replacement and then some weakening after that. But the storm is going to be growing. This is Bermuda right here. Here's the core of the storm about 200 miles or so away. So the worst stays north, and then it's going to weaken but remain a powerful hurricane over the north central Atlantic. Here's where the models take the system, and nothing has it hitting Bermuda anymore, and nothing really has it hitting Nova Scotia. But the UK Met says, once again, we're going to tweak it back to the west and bring this close to Cape Race, Newfoundland. So if you're in Newfoundland, keep an eye on this as this has started to shift back to your west once again. Category 4 likely here in the next 24 hours, and then gradual weakening. Should be back below major strength here by the time we get to Wednesday and Thursday as the storm is leaving the Bermuda Triangle. And you can see on the HAFS-B here, we are looking at some pretty intense pressure as deep as 940 millibars or so, and then starting to rise after that, but still a powerful hurricane in the north central Atlantic. Here's a look at the wind field from Franklin, and You're going to see winds as high as 140 miles per hour or so. As the storm is getting closer to Bermuda, see Bermuda right over here, we could see 30 to 50 mile per hour winds. If this gets any closer, those winds come way up. If it moves farther away, then Bermuda escapes with a narrow victory here, and then that system moves away. You'll see the European continues to take the storm a little bit closer to Bermuda, by the way, here on Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday night, but it keeps those really tight isobars off to the north. And oh, by the way, here's Idalia, and look where Idalia goes here. It's going to be a weaker system, but very close to Bermuda, setting up what could be a very heavy rain event over the weekend here in Bermuda before it pulls away here on Monday and Tuesday of next week. Here's a look at wind gusts from the European. They're not as strong as yesterday, but still as high as 50 to 60 miles per hour, especially on the northwestern tip of the island here. And those strong winds are going to be during the day on Wednesday, and then things will relax by the time we get to Thursday of next week. Finally, Typhoon Saola's got winds of 135 to 140 miles per hour. This is the Philippines. We are still seeing strengthening here with the projection that this will be a super typhoon with winds of 150 to 160 miles per hour northeast of Luzon. The new track now has shifted south and keeps it just south of Taiwan, but the southern tip of the island will get battered hard if this track is correct. You can see on this HAFS tropical model, it is still projecting that the eye wall is going to go right over with the strongest winds. Pressures in the 930s, wind speeds at that point could be over 100 miles per hour. I'll show that to you here in just a little bit. And we're seeing 95 mile per hour winds sustained here over the southern tip, perhaps as high as 120 miles per hour. And then the storm will weaken after it passes Taiwan and heads towards China, setting up a heavy rain event in this area. Here's a look at the European as well. You'll see it has actually shifted those strong winds just south of Taiwan. It's obviously better news, but still a dangerous system. And then you'll see those winds are going to continue towards the China coast as this system weakens by Friday night and next Saturday. More on those to come, but please be safe out there. Please wrap up your preparations here if you are on the Big Bend and Nature Coast of Florida, and perhaps even the Tampa Bay area. This is going to be a very dangerous storm, and one that I think will overperform once again. Thank you so much for your time today. Please consider subscribing, and I'm going to be very busy this week. I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to have much time to respond to your questions. Those of you, though, who are paid members, I will be communicating with. That membership is just $9.99 a month. 33 cents a day for tailored forecasts, for more attention, and certainly a community where you can communicate with each other as well. I thank you for your time today. I give all the glory to God who has called me to do this as a Christian man, and I cannot do anything without God. He has called me to be a meteorologist. He's given me this gift, the gift to help save lives. If one person watches this video and I've helped them to convince them that they need to get out of harm's way, I've saved their life, and I'm doing God's will, and that's helping other people. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor of me his prisoner, but be thou partaker of the afflictions of the gospel according to the word of power of God, who hath saved us and called us with a holy calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose and grace, which was given us in Christ Jesus before the world began." The afflictions of the gospel. Gospel is the good news, but there's afflictions that come with that. That is, we have all been given the power of the Holy Spirit, and we are to be encouraged and to be of love for each other and to be of a sound mind. It's very difficult to have a sound mind when you're in the face of a major storm. I'm going to do my very best to keep my mind clear and to put God first here, but do my best to help you all, because we serve a very big God. He has saved us and called us with a holy calling, not according to our works, not what I'm doing here to help you all out, but his works. And that is leaning on God to get you through these difficult times. I want to pray for you. I prayed yesterday for those who are in the path of the storm. I want to pray for you again today. I'll be able to do that offline because I really want you all to see that God has a bigger calling for all of us. We are going to have to go through difficult times, afflictions, suffering. However, in the end, when our life here on earth is gone, we have that gift from God to live with Jesus Christ in heaven. He is coming again, and he is here for us. All we have to do is accept God's love through Jesus Christ. Thank you all so much today. I hope you have a blessed day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. God bless you.